have her presidential elections over the weekend, and we hear INEC say, "Oh, we're going to move it by a few days, by 5 days to the 9th of June." What do you make of this, Justin?
Well, INEC is basically defending itself from some backlash from
Mm,
that action, which is not unusual in our space. You know, we have rules, and then it seems that the rules shift according to the demand of the day. Nothing seems to be hard and fast. In this situation, so the timetable for the primaries was moved by INEC. INEC is saying we didn't do this on our own. We had a meeting with the leaders of all the political parties in Nigeria, and they requested an
mm,
extension of the time because they all had their different reasons. So several meetings were held apparently, and on two out of three occasions, INEC turned down the request, and then finally, the parties again came together. 16 out of the 18 registered parties came together and again asked INEC to please give them an extension. Initially, they had started from asking for an extension of up to 60 days, came down to 30 days, all denied. And then finally, INEC gave them this 6 day extension, even though INEC is saying, listen, this doesn't affect the overall election timetable. We
mm.
can accommodate this within the overall timetable. But here's the thing for me. Again, it's about rules. If we have an expectation encoded, whether it's in the electoral act or anything, if we say that this is the timeline, it cannot be at the convenience. It doesn't matter if all of you are not ready, right? The point is that these are the rules. But I mean, an argument could be made that number one, it didn't act unilaterally.
All rules are made to be broken.
True, true, based on exigency. But when exigencies become the norm, Dexter, it's not, it's something else. It's anyhowness.
But we're a federal republic of any honest.
Well, now you talk. So that's the story here, right? And INEC has defended themselves by saying we didn't do this alone. All the stakeholders came together to do
Justin,
this.
INEC is going to end the registration of voters, continuous voter registration by the 30th of June. But we've seen extension for political parties with submitting of names for presidential candidates.
And there have been calls for extension of that as well.
Exactly. So are we going to also see pressure on INEC to extend the CVR?
Well, to the extent that they have already done is justifiable in their argument, then there is no argument against extension of the voter registration.
Just by the very name continuous, they're not supposed to stop
They're
it.
not supposed to stop it. So it should continue. It should be an ongoing process. It should
All
not
right.
be locked into any timetable, in my opinion.
Now let's look at this in from the Vanguard newspaper. Another explosion rocks Kaba in Kogi State. Now the police command in Kogi yesterday confirmed another yet to be ascertained explosion in Kaba town of Kababunu local government area of the state. The command's public relations officer SP William Oviaya, who confirmed the incident in Lokoja, said there was no casualty. Cheta, this particular incident has been, recurrent in the north central. Now we hear about this one in Kogi State. Looks like the first of it in this year, 2022, in that particular state and in Kaba precisely. Bring us up to speed with this.
Second in Kogi this year, but I think that's a bit beside the point. We have a problem. We have a security problem. We may as well just go into the next story as well because it's all largely related. The attacks in the Katsina. So basically, today is the last day of May, and so when I saw this story, I went to my office's database to check, and I found that in the month of May alone, we have had 11 incidents in the country related to Islamist terror. That's we are filtering away from all other various terrorist groups. And you have all sorts of terrorist activities in the country now, so-called bandits, IPOB, unknown gunmen. It's now a cocktail. We've lost the plot. We've basically lost um, uh, the security services have lost monopoly of violence. And what you see, like for example, in this Katsina incident that is in the next story, what you see is the terrorists actually attacked the checkpoint.
Okay, so let's just add that story real quickly. From the Vanguard newspaper, terrorist attack at Sina security checkpoint, set 3 vehicles ablaze. And this happened.
And then went away.
This happened at Jabia local government area of Katsina State. They burnt down two operational vehicles and a private car on a motorcycle. And well, someone notified the security agents at the checkpoint of the development. It goes on and on.
Now, GBR is the last local government before you cross into Nishi. So there's every possibility that those guys came from Nishi. But there's also the possibility, because there's this large forest in that area that extends all the way to Zamfara, covers then down to Birnin Quarry in Kaduna. It covers a whole lot of area. And for example, there's every evidence that indicates that the victims of the train kidnap from 2 months ago now are in that forest. So essentially, what I'm trying to do is to thread all of this together to say that it is a subset of one major problem, which is the loss of monopoly of violence. And how do you what is the best way to even express this? On the 28th of March, the Chief of Army Staff visited the scene of Kaduna train attack, and he ordered his troops to rescue the victims. 3 weeks later, on the 21st of April, the president, the commander-in-chief, reiterated that order. Yesterday, the kidnappers released video of their victims. They are still in possession of 62 of them. We don't know how many people were kidnapped. We don't know how many died. We just know that they still have at least 62 people. A number of people are still missing, unaccounted for. This bombing in Kogi, again, remember that I said we've had 11 incidents of Islamic terror in the month of May. 4 of them have been bomb blasts. A total of 38 people have been killed. It's all indicative of that loss of control within the geographical region called Nigeria by Nigeria Security Services. And it's something that will come and bite all of us. Because essentially what we now have is that armed men can move and do things at their time and their choosing. That's essentially what it is, non-state actors. It's frightening.
All right, let's keep this moving. Now, in from the These Day newspaper, feel okay, let's take this other one. We'll come back to this day. From the Vanguard newspaper now, banks' credit to government surges 17.7% to 16.6 trillion naira. MPC expresses concern. Now, credit to the government rose by 2.5 trillion naira or 17.7% to 16.6 trillion as of April 2022 from 14.1 trillion credit data for April this year. Now, it shows that credit to the government rose steadily in the 4-month period, rising from 14.1 trillion naira in January to 14.7 in February to 16.3 in March before advancing to 16.6 in April this year. Justin, what is going on? Nigerians want to know.
What is going on is that the government is borrowing more and more money. The debt stock is rising. And essentially we're mortgaging future revenues in exchange for what value is what I cannot really tell anybody. Because as long as we are running a deficit budget that is funding consumption, this is a race to the bottom. Are we going to keep essentially when the government is borrowing money, it's creating money out of thin air, really ways and means. It's what the CBN folks will tell you it is. We're just printing money to spend because all this revenue that is being mortgaged in the future, you have to service this debt, right? That you're incurring. From what revenues? We can't see it happening. Our major export, we have wrangled ourselves into a situation where oil prices are rising, so the price of our major export product is rising internationally, but it's creating problems for us at home because we are
Number one,
subsidizing
not
petroleum.
producing enough. We'll come to the subsidies and so enough.
So all this borrowing essentially is driven by subsidy. We are subsidizing petroleum consumption, so that's going to be 40 trillion so far from 4 trillion so far going towards fuel subsidy, up from a 400 billion budgeted for. So we're now going to look for 4 trillion. The budget is 7 trillion. So look at what percentage of that is going towards funding subsidy. This same subsidy that we've been arguing about how it exists, what it exists. The bottom line at the end of the day is if we are not refining our own product, if we continue in this importation business, there's never going to come a time when we will not need petroleum products in the country. Not in the foreseeable future anyway. If we do not fix that, this is our future happening here and now.
All right, let's look through some of the messages coming in at the moment. We have MI from Akoka says the Federal Republic of Anyhowness, vintage cheta, chaos and confusion have become the signatures of a country that calls herself the giant, the African giant. And we have Tajuddin from Alimosho saying, Cheta, where have you been? It's good to have you back. Samuel from Lekki comes in with a message, says, I won't blame INEC for the extension. Many political parties pressured INEC to make the shift. My own is just that they must never repeat the action of 2019. Up till 11 p.m. on the eve of the 2019 elections, they insisted the elections must hold. They allowed people to take permissions from work, travel to vote, and then they cancelled the elections and postponed for 2 weeks. They should not try that again this
They
time
postponed it for
around.
1 week. Or just let's be accurate. And I'm not complaining about it because I won a bet of 150,000 naira on top of that one. I thought somebody would postpone it. The guy was like, no. Then we woke up. We woke up. We woke up on the morning and they had postponed. I was like, guy, give me my money.
We will not take it.
So
Like,
are we going to see that happen again? Fingers crossed.
Well, sooner as the time comes closer, we'll know.
Well, Nee sends a message says, are we subsidizing petroleum products? Really?
Eh?
I love your sarcasm.
Well, I want to believe it's sarcasm there. It's okay. Well, Cisco Delgado just says, good morning, Cheta. Welcome back. We have Ken from Surulere saying, I really miss your historical analysis. For me, the insecurities of all our security apparatus. May God help Nigeria from this abracadabra. All right, that's Ken from Surulere. Raymond in First Access. Cheta, glad to hear your voice. Welcome back. Sound analysis. It's okay. Nick sends a message. Everyone saying welcome back, Cheta. Jerry as well, also echoing welcome back. Now let's keep it going. We have this one in now from, let's look at this from the This Day newspaper. We to you, Cheta, for this. Fuel subsidy may hit 6 trillion naira in 2022.
Only.
IMF warns Nigeria. Now, with Nigeria's fuel subsidy payouts averaging 500 billion naira monthly, total expenditure on the subsidy could hit a record 6 trillion naira mark by the end. The IMF is warning yesterday. Now, the multilateral lender also revealed that a macro fiscal stress test is conducted on the country. It showed that interest payments on debts in the country could amount to Nigeria using 100% of its revenue to service debts by 2026, if not closely monitored. But the big question
more than
is,
90%.
can we take out subsidy at this time? Already Nigerians are bearing the brunt, even with the 500 billion naira paid every month.
See, there were so many times that we could have taken out the subsidy. I mean, let's start from 10 years ago when so many of us, including myself, foolishly went to protest against the removal of subsidy. That was a big case of all of us collectively carried a gun, put on our heads and pulled the trigger.
It's not all of us, some of you did it to all of us.
See, this is the problem now. Every people that were supporting us, like this my cousin to
this my friend.
He donated to help me in that period. So anyway, the point is we messed up. And unfortunately, this thing is about political will now. And the current government does not care. They just want to see out their time in office and then keep the can down the road for the next government to take care of. Now, here's where the problem is. In 2021, the FG's entire revenue was about 5.53 trillion naira. Already this year, as of day 153 of this year, which is today, we have already spent more than 3 trillion naira on the subsidy, which is way more than half of the entire revenue of last year. Remember that it's from revenue that they will pay salaries. It's from revenue that they will do interest payments. It's from revenue that I think pretty much everything that you need for a country to run. And then we are already on track to spend more than the revenue of last year just subsidizing petrol. I mean, it's the perfect scam. And I mean, I wish I was an oil lifter. I'll just be sitting down and just be every morning as you wake up, you just say catching, catching, because that's what it is. And what makes this whole thing so ridiculous is, do you remember that in March, the Minister of Finance confirmed that the government was going to borrow, I think, $2.2 billion euro bond for fuel subsidy. So we're actually borrowing. So we are literally putting money on the ground or in a pot, pouring petrol in the money and setting it on fire. We will pay for it. There's no such thing as a free lunch. We will pay for it. And unfortunately, and this is where the last 7 years have been a huge missed opportunity. Because you see, the fuel subsidy and so many other things are politically inconvenient. Buhari came into office with enormous goodwill, the kind of goodwill that allows you to do all sorts. He could have done and undone. Now that is gone. And whoever succeeds in, whether it is Atiku Abubakar, a candidate of PDP, whether it is Peter Obi, candidate of Labour Party, whether it is one of the 23 people who will stand on APC for APC candidature in 6 days' time, whoever succeeds him will not have the goodwill that he had when he came in. So that person is going to find it difficult. Unfortunately, we have now entered, we have at the minimum, we have at least 6 interest payments under moratorium, which will kick in June 2023. So whoever is coming in is already coming in with serious basic. I look at all the people running and saying they want to become president of the country, and I'm just looking at
Sorry, let's explain that moratorium very well. So what you said,
you are
means
the
that,
former banker, so use people.
so what you mean is there's a moratorium on interest. That means this government borrowed money. Of course, the date of payment is in future. But the interest that we're supposed to be paying, okay, we'll also not pay the interest. So just suspend everything till 2023. Then we can start whoever is
till June 2023.
then whoever is there can
Essentially,
start
Buhari
paying
will not
interest.
retire.
It was the same thing that happened with fuel subsidy. They said we're going to move it this year, and then other people protested. The Minister of State for Petroleum said let's move it till May 2023. So I mean, the new government coming in will still have to meet the same problem.
Anyway,
Government is a continuum.
government is a continuum. That is what see. This is what is going to happen one day. It happened to Argentina before, so it will happen to one day. An Argentinian warship went for military exercise in Ghana, and Argentina creditors were there waiting for the ship. They see them. They told us, they swim, go us. Nigeria's president will go to Davos one day. They will seize the presidential jets and give him economy class ticket and say, "Be good." It will happen.
All right, let's look at this one from New Telegraph. The Squire to the federal government plans 999 million naira daily feeding of school children. Critical stakeholders in the nation's education sector have kicked against and faulted the 999 million naira Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development said it spends daily to feed approximately 10 million pupils across public primary schools under the National Homegrown School Feeding Program. Justin, are we still feeding Nigerian children across our public schools?
If you ask me,
The answer is no.
Well, but there are figures here that show that we're feeding these children.
Yes, there are figures that show that we consume 90 million liters of oil every day.
This is probably one of the most controversial programs that this government is running. I mean, once you take the subsidy thing out of the equation or set that aside, this is one of the craziest things I've seen. Because on the surface of it, it's a laudable idea. But that's the thing we're very good at in the public space, taking an idea that is of service and value to the people and just turning it into a straw for siphoning money out of the national coffers without accountability and transparency. That is the hallmark of this program. So we are supposedly feeding, and there have been criticisms for some time now of this program. We're supposedly feeding 10 million children a day. There is no information about where these children are was, if we remember, during lockdown, one of the first controversies that came out of this ministry during lockdown or after lockdown, they came out and said that they had spent XYZ amount feeding children in school during lockdown for about a year. And the question was, whose children were you feeding? Were you delivering the food to their houses? How? Right? There's no information about the target beneficiaries. There is no protocol that says this is how this program is being administered and these are the controls that are in place. So this is a program that it's very easy. We're doing this program in faith and hope that there is integrity on the part of the people who are administering it.
Justin, we live in a country of over 200 million people. Yes, we don't
Is
even
it?
have the actual figure.
Allegedly.
Yeah, we're hoping that, I mean, we can conduct census. I know the actual number of persons we have in the country, quote unquote, 200 million people or above or below. Now, if the Federal Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Disaster Management is saying, oh, we've spent it on 10 million Nigerians across the 36 states and the FCT, don't you think that the impact might not be seen or felt by other Nigerians? If, for instance, we have 200 million people
Mr.
and they
Beppo,
spent on 10
Mr.
million
Beppo,
people,
if you are
That's
feeding 10 million
5%.
children a day, you won't need to tell people.
So there's
5%
nothing to
of
prove to
100.
Nigerians.
If you
Nigerians are the ones
feeding
listening
10
to us.
million children a day, you will not need to tell people.
5% of 100. I mean, they will tell you that in the north, in the core north, they have to feed these children.
Which part? The northeast or the
No,
northwest?
there's a report.
If
The
ravaged
humanitarian
by-
management has
If
put out
they
this
are
report
feeding
consistently.
10 million children a day anywhere in this country, they will not need to tell people. I will repeat that, and I'll just end it there.
Yeah.
For the record, we've done monitoring work on this program for UNICEF. I'll just put that out there. But if you are feeding 10 million children a day,
So are we
You
feeding
will
less
not-
than 10 million children per day? Because I know that there's a budget for this.
I think maybe this is one of those things that you leave to the imagination of the listening audience.
Yeah, this is why people don't pass IELTS.
So if you're hearing our voices and we're discussing this issue, the question goes to you, dear listeners. Do you know any children that have been fed by the government?
All right, let's bring this story in. Cheta will come to you for this one before we get into the messages again. Airfares surged by 52% over Forex Jet A1 crisis. Now, the average airfare paid by passengers on specified routes for a single journey has increased by 52% in the past 12 months. This is according to the National Bureau of Statistics.
I don't know why I don't know why this is news. I came in from Abuja yesterday. The airfare was so it's
Over 60,000.
68.
Wow.
So basically, it's something that has been happening. And one of the last times I was here, I actually talked about it. One of the fundamental problems with our whole air transport system is the fact that we don't even run it properly. In places that they run these things properly, they have you buy fuel, jet's fuel, and you keep it in storage for months. Basically, you buy months worth of jet fuel so that you will not have to be subject to price shocks and all of that. We don't have those storage facilities. It's the same thing with food. Our problem with this is storage infrastructure. We don't keep storage infrastructure. We don't have proper storage infrastructure. We don't have storage infrastructure for periods. Let me shock you. Nigeria's food storage capacity as a country is 4 days max. So which means that if there is a proper shock, and right now we are seeing a proper global shock with the Russia-Ukraine thing, if food stops being imported, and by the way, the some association, I've forgotten their name, yes, they were begging the federal government to remove the 15% levy on grain. If that grain supply stops, whatever we have in our silos will last 4 days. So my big issue with the whole jet fuel thing now is, I don't know if you remember, 2 weeks ago was it, Femi Gbajabiamila pressured the NMPC, and they agreed to start selling aviation fuel to these guys at subsidized rates. Do you remember? That's another subsidy. They said they would do it for 3 months. The current fuel subsidy that we are still struggling to remove was introduced temporarily by Yakubu Gowon. None of us in this room was born when Yakubu Gowon was still head of state. It is still there. We've not been able to remove it. That 3 months is going to very easily turn to 20 years. And this is how we just keep putting burden on top of ourselves without solving the fundamental underlying problems, which is number one, storage infrastructure. If you have the storage infrastructure to store aviation fuel in maybe 3 hub airports, Lagos, Abuja, Kano, store it for 6 months at a time, you will not be subject to price shocks.
All right. Quickly, let's look at some of the messages. Tayo from Aja says, I fondly remember our current finance minister saying we don't have a revenue problem. I like a good joke. Emeka sends a message, says, welcome, Cheta. It continues. A lot of messages here welcoming you. Oh my God, Cheta is on. I'm just tuning in. I've missed his analysis. Can we know? Okay, that's Frank from Beggar. Fabian is saying, as always, analysis factual and correct. Unfortunately, it appears we will remain handicapped till this government exits. That's Fabian sending in that message. Um, well, Jibril from Okota says, do anyone in the studio know any students who have benefited from this feeding? Okay, Cisco Delgado says this feeding program is a scam. Raymond from Festac says, have not seen any child fed by government, both in Lagos and Imo State. My parents are teachers, and I have 3 uncles as teachers. None have seen the food. Tajuddin says, Victor, they are not feeding anybody. I do not know any child or children that is fed by the ghost program of humanitarian affairs of these governments.
Some faith now.
Funke from Ikoyi. Nigerians are so unknowledgeable and therefore can't manage their expectations. Nothing goes for nothing. Whatever is free has been paid for by someone else. Don't we see it? Samuel from Lekki says, can we get a class action suit to force the ministers of finance, education, and information to provide date of the school children fed during the lockdown and the vendors who provided the food? That humongous expense must be accounted for. Adebo Wale says, absolutely golden. Okay. Fred comes in with this one. He says, there is no feeding anywhere. In the north, children are out of school as a result of terrorism. In the east, nothing like that. Here in the west, it's the same. This school feeding program is just another source of stealing public funds. Anthony Francis says, the so-called homegrown school feeding program is an episode of brazen corruption with strong head audacity. They don't care even if you complain for 1 year, an attitude that's synonymous with the current administration. So sad. That's Tony from M Beach. Dave from Ikorodu says, I don't understand all these things. Where is the place of subsidy in the oil for fuel deal the NNPC talks about? And Jerry comes in again, says, please tell the government to give that money to the parents so they feed the children and wards. We thank them for the love. We squeeze this one in as well. Says, the school feeding program is real. I'm a teacher in Lagos. Ibrahim from Surulere is the only person who says, oh, this one is real. Well, let's take this last one in. How many people did Jesus feed? That's Yinka Bolu. I apologize. A lot of messages we cannot take, but we're out of time. Thank you very much, Justin EJ. We can find you on Twitter at justin.ej. Justin EJ on Twitter. Thank you very much, Cheta. How can we hook up with you on social media?
CHXDM.
All right, let's do this again tomorrow at 7:30. My name is Victor Pepple. Thank you very much for being a part of the show. We'll bring you Grapevine at 8:15. Good morning.